Buy unlimited messaging and get free unlimited calling to any U.S. mobile on any network. AT&T.
This is not a prescription. This is Mary, who has a million things to pick up each month on top of her prescriptions. So she was thrilled that her Walgreens pharmacist recommended a 3-month supply and would always be there to answer questions about her health. Now, Mary gets 3 refills in one, and for 3 months, she's done. More or less. Ask your pharmacist about a 90-day supply today. Walgreens, there's a way to stay well.
Cranberry juice? Wake up!
That's good morning, veggie style.
For half the calories plus veggie nutrition, could have had a V8.
After 100 years of hybrid technology, someone finally built one you'll actually enjoy driving. The 360 horsepower, 32 miles per gallon Infiniti M Hybrid, the high-performance hybrid.
Life is full of little twists and turns. ING can help you take the right steps along the way. The first step is finding your number, the amount you need to save to retire the way you want while protecting the ones you love. Learn more at ing.com/US.
Carpet, 70% off. Hardwood, laminate, 70% off. Ceramics, 70% off. During Empire's huge winter warehouse sale. Save big on the carpet and flooring you've been wanting. And the great service you'd expect. With warranties up to 30 years. And installed next day. Don't miss your chance to save 70% on the good stuff. But hurry, Empire's huge winter warehouse sale won't last long. Call today.
800-588-2300 Empire.
Today.
Confidence. Available in color. Depend for women is now peach. Looks and fits like underwear. Same great protection. Depend. Good morning. Great day.
Welcome back to MSNBC's live coverage of the New Hampshire primary. I'm Rachel Maddow out of our headquarters here in New York City. And this hour, we're going to be talking to a couple of big surrogates to the top campaigns in New Hampshire, including former presidential candidate Tim Pawlenty, who is now supporting Mitt Romney. We'll also be speaking with Tom Ridge, who is backing Jon Huntsman. But first, let's go back to New Hampshire and Chris Matthews. Chris?
Thanks, Rach. You know, it seems like we got to keep reminding ourselves tonight. We're going to be on for a long time. All these candidates are coming out of the starting gate tonight. This is the first primary. Right. Gingrich ain't going nowhere except south. Right. So's Santorum. So's Ron Paul. So's, of course, Romney. And so's Rick Perry. They're all going south. Right. Let me ask you about Ron Paul. We've been arguing about whether he's important or not. He may not be important in terms of actually winning this, but you've got some reporting on this.
Well, in the old terms, follow the money. Ron Paul raised $13 million in the last quarter. The only person to raise more money was Mitt Romney. They're planning and hoping in the first quarter of this year to raise perhaps $20 million. The Ron Paul campaign is already well organized in a lot of states down the road ahead. And don't forget, only 2 campaigns filed enough petitions and signatures to get on the ballot in Virginia on Super Tuesday. Those are Mitt Romney and Ron Paul. The anti-war message is strong. That's number one. Number two, the Romney campaign was concerned enough about Jon Huntsman, who I think in part is also powered by the anti-war message, as you were discussing, and that I wrote about in the Huffington Post the other day. They were concerned enough about Huntsman that they did 3 focus groups among independent voters at the very end here, just in the last few days. They wanted to assess Huntsman, they wanted to assess the independent vote, and I think they were also looking at where they go on foreign policy. Don't forget that Mitt Romney moved way to the right on foreign policy because that was sort of open ground for him. He couldn't do it on cultural issues, he couldn't do it on big government issues because he was the Massachusetts moderate.
So there's an opening there in the middle on the war.
Yes,
and my
there is.
question
That's right.
My favorite political question is, you know, so what? So what if Huntsman runs anti-war? It says bring the troops home from Afghanistan. Right. So what if Ron Paul says we're wasting all our money overseas, bring them home around the world? How is that going to affect perhaps the ultimate winner, who now looks like Romney at some point? If he's the nominee, he's a hawk, as you say. Right. What's going to bring him back from being a hawk?
Well, I don't know that anything will or can, in which case Barack Obama, who is no better than an even bet, it seems to me at this point, is going to be appealing not to Ron Paul himself, but to a lot of his voters. Yeah. Looking at those rallies, Chris, you and I were at those rallies. Yeah. A lot of kids at those rallies. Many of them were for Barack Obama in 2008. Yeah. Obama did not deliver for them. They're looking for some way for somebody to deliver, and there's room for Barack Obama.
We are getting out of Iraq. I guess they want more. And by the way, if I were the president and his people, I'd listen to the anti-war crowd and say, we're still with you. We're still your leader. Right? Because Romney's going to be making more and more commitments to the right about bombing Iran and all that stuff.
By the way, especially as he goes south for Super Tuesday, Chris.
I don't want to think about the promises this crowd starts to make, Rach, down in the South about bombing Iran and going into war. Anyway, back to you, Rachel Maddow.
Chris and Howard, thank you. Joining us now is former Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty, who ran for the Republican nomination, who dropped out after the Ames straw poll in Iowa. Governor Pawlenty is now supporting Mitt Romney. Governor, it's good to see you. Thanks for being with us.
I'm delighted to be with you, Rachel, and your colleagues there. You guys are abnormally thoughtful tonight and subdued. You're not your normal hysterical selves.
Is thoughtful abnormal by necessity when you look at us?
Well, when I see that group on the monitor, it's kind of like a abnormal star chamber. Yes.
Well, we appreciate that. I'll take that as a compliment. I've always felt like I belonged in that bar in Star Wars. Let me ask you, Governor. CBS just did a poll of Republican primary voters. 58% of them said they wish that there were other people running for president than the crew that is running right now. What's most striking to me is that number has gone up 12% since October. What is it that Republican primary voters are not getting, they're not liking when they look at Mitt Romney and the rest of these nominees?
Well, I don't think you should read too much into that. When you have 6 or 7 candidates running, it's hard for any one candidate to break out of the pack. The kind of polling results that you just indicated are pretty typical in the early stages of caucuses and primaries. But what it's overlooking is this. Mitt Romney just unexpectedly won Iowa. Many people said he couldn't do that. Now he's poised tonight to win New Hampshire. There's been no non-incumbent candidate for the nomination in the modern history of the country that's won those 2 states. He's ahead slightly in South Carolina in the polls and in Florida. You should look at that respectfully and say, that is amazing to have somebody in this stage in the process who wins both Iowa and New Hampshire is leading in South Carolina and Florida. Instead of saying what's wrong with Mitt Romney, we should be saying he looks to be one of the strongest nominees with the most momentum in the modern history of the country.
In terms of the message that Mitt Romney brings as a front-runner, and you're right to describe him as an almost prohibitive front-runner at this point, right now the polling going into tonight's results in New Hampshire showed Ron Paul and John Huntsman claiming about as much of the vote combined as Mitt Romney had. Both of those candidates representing a pretty strong anti-war message. John Huntsman saying that he would get troops out of Afghanistan very quickly. Ron Paul, obviously almost a purist isolationist. Is there an anti-war message that Mitt Romney ought to be paying attention to among Republican voters as represented by the Huntsman and Paul campaigns?
Well, within the Republican Party, there is a bit of a divide on war and defense and security issues. And I'd say Ron Paul and John Huntsman and some others represent one perspective, which is get the troops out, get them out now, buy into the Obama argument about shrinking defense and security budgets. Mitt Romney and me and others represent the other side of that argument. It's a legitimate debate. I have strong views on it. Mitt has strong views on it. And I'm glad, by the way, that he's calling for reestablishing and restoring defense spending at historic percentages of the economy, rebuilding our Navy, committing to not let Iran have a nuclear weapon. In my view, those are good things, and I'm glad Mitt is standing strong on those issues. But Ron Paul and John Huntsman have a different view of it.
Governor Pawlenty, it's Lawrence O'Donnell here. What kind of win does the former governor of Massachusetts have to have in New Hampshire? The guy from Massachusetts always wins New Hampshire. Michael Dukakis, Paul Tsongas. Paul Tsongas got 33 over Bill Clinton at 24. Just how high a number does Mitt Romney have to get to call it a real win there?
Well, winning these 2 states in a row is a historic victory, no matter how you slice it. But whether he gets in the low 30s, mid 30s, or high 30s, that's a tremendous victory, particularly when you have this many candidates in the field. So if Mitt comes somewhere in the 30s, I'd say that's a job well done, and on to South Carolina.
Governor Pawlenty, Al Sharpton, if the Mr. Romney does get a big margin tonight, or if he just wins decisively, You're right. It'll be the first time that you've had an Iowa and New Hampshire victor that didn't go on to get the nomination. But the question becomes, will there be a leading conservative or group of conservatives that would join you all in saying the conservatives ought to pull out and unite the party and stop this bickering and really make the conservatives that stay in, Gingrich has already made a huge buy in South Carolina and others, look like they are being destructive and going against the interests of the party? Do you think that some of the party leaders, conservative side, will begin starting the drumbeat to narrow this down to just letting Romney win the nomination and playing his sights on President Obama?
Well, Al, we have a democracy, and people can run and stay in as long as they can or want to. But the fact of the matter is, conservative leaders have expressed that sentiment, the sentiment you just expressed, for a long time. And these candidates have remained in the race. And the premise that Mitt Romney isn't conservative is flawed. He cut taxes, cut spending, supported traditional marriage. He's pro-life. He's strong on defense. And to say that he's not conservative is an incorrect premise. And I would also add, compared to who? I mean, if you want to have a contest about who's conservative and you line up these other candidates in the Republican nomination field, I know their record. You can go down every one of them, and none of them are perfect, and neither is Mitt.
So you're saying that Mr. Romney is as conservative as Santorum and Gingrich and Rick Perry?
What I'm saying is, you look at their records, and they all have things that would make conservatives or some conservatives do a double take or win. So none of them have the conservative gold standard record. You can go through their backgrounds, their record, and find all kinds of things that would say they're not conservative. But compared to this field and generally, Mitt Romney is a conservative, and importantly, he's led as a conservative and produced conservative results.
Is he a vulture capitalist?
Ed, you owe me dinner. Ed, you owe me dinner, by the way.
No,
I don't even know if I should be talking to you.
You had to win 3 more seats in the midterm for me to owe you dinner, but I'd buy anyway. I didn't vote for you in Minnesota, but you are a pretty good guy. All right, but I got to ask you, your candidate's had a rough 48 hours. He's being called a vulture capitalist by Governor Rick Perry. What about that? Does that follow him?
Well, I watched your show last night. I had insomnia. I stayed up late. I had nothing else to do. I had ironed my shirts. I had brushed my teeth. I had literally nothing else to do. So I watched your show. And you took it out of context like everybody else did. I was at that speech.
I didn't call him a vulture capitalist. Governor Perry did today. If you were paying attention to the show last night, you would have seen that part of it. The fact is, there is a conservative candidate in the Republican field that refers to the guy you're supporting as a vulture capitalist. You should have caught that on the show, Governor.
Yeah, let me just say, look, the fact that Republicans are making Barack Obama's and the Democrats' argument, criticizing private enterprise, criticizing private investment, buying into the premise that somehow the government can guarantee everybody's job forever, that's the Democrats' argument. We're in the Republican Party for private enterprise. So I was disappointed in the Speaker's comments and Rick Perry's comments, and it was pivoting off a comment that I know you, Ed, you're smart enough to have read the whole clip and seen the whole paragraph.
I know how it's taken out of context, but why did the Republican candidates pick it up that way? I didn't pick it up like that. They did. They're running for it, not me. I mean, I'm just reporting what they're saying.
They're exploiting it for political gain, and I think you need to be more responsible than that.
Okay. Maybe they're being hysterical.
Yeah, maybe they are. Maybe they just listen.
Governor Tim Pawlenty, thank you. I think that the breaking news here tonight is that when you get tired, you go to bed before 8 p.m. But we're not going to try.
Rachel, I just want to make sure Ed owes me dinner, and he's not paying, and I'm a little ticked off about it.
Well, now we know it can be the Blue Plate special, big guy.
I have paid enough taxes under you in Minnesota. I'll guarantee you that.
Oh man, oh man. I thought you'd be at least a good enough person to pay off your wagers, Ed.
You didn't win enough seats, and you know you didn't.
Governor Pawlenty,
you are unbelievable.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your time. I hope to have you back soon.
Good night.
Good night. All right. Chris Matthews is back with us from Manchester. Chris.
You know, it's interesting. I'm going to go up to this with Tom Ridge now. But let's take on Tom Ridge is former governor of Pennsylvania. He's available right now. He's supporting John Huntsman. I'm going to tee you up here, my friend Governor, because I am so amazed at the amazing reality of American politics, and it gets worse every year. Mitt Romney never served in the military. None of his kids did. Newt Gingrich never served. As far as I know, his children haven't. Whereas Huntsman, your guy, and you were a combat veteran in Vietnam. Huntsman's got a couple kids in the service now. You guys are the moderates on war. These other flamethrowers out there, they love the concept of war as long as it doesn't affect their families. I mean, these guys are making irresistible, crazy, biblical commitments about going to war with Iran that are totally outrageous. Nobody should be making these kind of commitments before an election, certainly during a political hot campaign. And yet you and your guy, and Ron Paul, to his credit, are willing to say, let's stop the war fever in this country.